Before we get into today's game, I want to talk about the sponsors for my channel. Card Conduit is the best way to sell your unused magic cards. Whether you've got a box of unsorted bulk, or a complete and alphabetized set, there's a great option for everyone. With a payout averaging 19% better than using any one buy list, and that's after fees are applied, you can rest assured you'll get the best bang for your buck. If you're a skeptic like me, their easy customer service and detailed reports make the whole interaction transparent and safe. And if you use the affiliate link in the description below, or the promo code MTGMUDSTA, you'll save 10% off their fees. And 401 Games, Canada's one-stop shop for trading cards, board games, and hobby supplies. Not to mention an easy to use and great online buy list. And if you use the promo code MTGMUDSTA, your first purchase of MTG sealed and singles will be 5% off. And Dragon Shield, the strongest sleeves for your strongest deck. So be sure to use the code MUDSTA or the affiliate link down below to save 5% on your next order. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's patron shoutout goes to Sparky. Thanks Sparky for supporting me through Patreon. In today's game, John, Arja, and Matt have joined me, with Matt playing my Azlask deck. He saw all the cool stuff that Arja got to do with it and wants to try it out. He keeps Verdant Catacombs, Training Center, Rejuvenating Springs, Reflecting Pool, Sacred Foundry, Ojer Tak, Deepest Foundation, and an Arcane Denial. Arja is playing his tried and true Meren deck, keeping Foul Orchard, Farseek, Traverse the Ulvenwald, Life and Death, Animate Dead, Satyr Wayfinder, and Diabolic Intent. John is playing Chromium, keeping an Exotic Orchard, Bitter Blossom, Terramorphic Expanse, Port Town, Isolated Chapel, Camball Console Allocation, and Open the Armory. Last but not least, I am playing the patron-submitted General Mahault deck, keeping Farseek, Forest, Anzrag the Quake Mole, Portraiser, Mountain, and a Spine Rock Knoll. John wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a Terramorphic Expanse, sacrificing it and passing while searching. Arja draws and plays a tapped Foul Orchard. Matt plays a Verdant Catacombs, sacrificing it and losing 1 to go and find a land as he passes. I play a tapped Spine Rock Knoll and hide away a card. John's turn 2 has him playing an Isolated Chapel, and he then casts Bitter Blossom. Arja plays a Swamp, and goes on his way casting a Satyr Wayfinder. He reveals his top 4, keeping a Swamp from it and binning the rest. Matt just plays a Training Center. I've got a Forest return, and pay 2 for Farseek, going to find a land and passing. John makes a Fairy token and loses a life on his upkeep and then draws. He plays an Exotic Orchard, and then casts Camball. But Matt responds with an Arcane Denial, countering it. After that, John just passes turn. Matt draws 1 while John draws 2 in Arja's upkeep, and then Arja draws for turn. He casts Traverse the Ulvenwald, going to find a forest. And he then casts Death, reanimating Masaryk and losing some life. Going to combat, Arja pokes Matt for 1 with the Satyr Wayfinder, and then passes to Matt himself. Matt's got a Rejuvenating Springs for turn, and he then pays 3 for Jaheira, and passes to me. I draw and play a Mountain. I've got enough to cast Anzrag, and once the Mole God resolves, I pass to John. John loses a life and makes a Fairy, and then draws and casts Shadow Spear in his main phase. He then plays a Port Town, and passes to Arja after that. Arja draws, and plays a Swamp. He casts his own Farseek, going to find another Swamp. And once that's on the field, casts Spore Frog. He then hits me with Masaryk, and passes. Matt's turn has him drawing, and playing a Reflecting Pool. He then pays 2 for an Arcane Signet. He follows up by casting Azlask, and then passes after that. I draw and play a Forest, and then cast Grand Melee. Going to combat, after quite a bit of debate about how Spore Frog could potentially create a draw, I decide to just swing Anzrag at John. He's forced to block with both fairies, and I get another combat step. I then swing it at John again, who takes 8 this time, and I pass after that. John loses 1 and makes a Fairy token, and then draws for turn. He decides he's not a big fan of being a punching bag, and decides to do something about that by casting Ghostly Prison. He passes to Arja after that. Arja's turn has him playing a swamp for turn, and he then casts Meren and goes to combat. He has to swing out, so he swings everything at me. I take the 4, and after combat, Arja sacrifices Spore Frog, putting a counter onto his team thanks to Mazarik, and then gets an experience counter because of Meren. During his end step, Meren triggers, and to the surprise of no one who's ever seen a Meren deck, Arja brings back Spore Frog and then passes. Matt draws and plays an isolated chapel. He then plays Erebos, Bleak-Hearted, and then pays for Erebos' ability, sacrificing Jaheira, to take out the Spore Frog. Arja responds sacrificing the frog, getting an experience counter, and fogging combat. Matt then swings Azlask at me for no damage to send a message, and passes after that. I draw and cast General Mahault Dragon. Going to combat, I swing the Mole God at Arja, and he's forced to block with Meren. Azrag gets +3/+3 from Mahault's trigger, and Meren gets taken out, plus I get another combat step. I then swing Azrag at Arja again, this time for 11, for threatening the lock, and he takes the hit, and I pass turn. John loses 1, makes a fairy token, and then draws. He plays a Prairie Stream, and goes to combat. Grand Melee's doing some real work this game, and he's forced to swing the fairy, going at me and dealing 1. Arja's main phase has him playing a swamp, and he then casts Bone Shards, discarding a Duskmangler to take out Azrag. Arja then follows up with an Animate Dead and targets the Duskmangler, but John is ready with a response, flashing in Containment Priest to exile it instead. Going to combat, Arja then swings out at John, paying the 4 for Ghostly Prison. John has to block, using both the Fairy and the Priest token, and once combat's done, Arja passes turn. Matt draws and plays a Sacred Foundry untapped and takes 2. He plays out Kalemne, and then follows up with Bastion of Remembrance, making a soldier token and going to combat. Matt swings Azlask at Arja for 2, and he then passes after that. I draw and play a Forest. I cast a Silverback Elder, and I go to combat. I swing Mahault at Arja, dealing 3, and passing after that. John makes his fairy token, losing 1, and then draws and plays an island in his main phase. He casts Solemnity, and then follows up with Open the Armory. He goes into his library, revealing Blackblade Reforged and putting it to hand. He then goes to combat, and swings one of the earlier fairy tokens at me and deals 1. He passes after that. Arja draws and goes to combat. He swings out at Matt, and Matt has to block everything. We then get drained from the Bastion. Arja then follows up combat by casting a Demon's Disciple, making us all sacrifice a creature. With Matt sacrificing a creature, he's able to pay 2 life to Erebos as well, and after that, Arja passes. Matt's turn has him playing Yavimaya Coast, and he then pays 6 for Ogier Attack, and passes to me. I draw and cast Nature's Lore, going to find a Cinder Glade. I then cast a Port Razor and get an on-cast trigger from the Elder, destroying Ghostly Prison. I then go to combat and swing the Elder at John, and he chumps with the fairy token. With nothing else, I pass. John loses 1, makes a fairy token, and draws. He plays Buried Ruin, and then passes to Arja. Arja draws, and in his main phase, recasts Meren. He goes to combat, swinging Mazarik at me for 5, and then goes to his end step. This gets him his Meren trigger, and he reanimates the Spore Frog, and passes. Matt plays a Sea of Clouds, and then casts Catacomb Sifter. Because of Ogier Attack, this makes him 3 Eldrazi Scion tokens, and he then goes to combat. He swings Ogier Attack at me, and I have to block with the Port Razor. I don't want to lose him though, so I cast Withstand Death and save it. Matt then recasts his commander and passes. I draw and cast a Sylvan Basilisk, which gets me an Elder trigger, and I blow up the Shadow Spear. I then cast a Tattermunge Witch and destroy the Bastion, to try and destroy the Bastion. Matt responds with the targeting on the stack, sacrificing a Scion to drain us for 1, scry 1, and then pays 2 life and draws a card to Erebos. Matt then does it again, and then a 3rd time, before finally letting the Bastion be destroyed. Going to combat, I swing the Silverback Elder at Arja, and the Portraiser goes at John. Arja blocks with his creatures, but sacrifices the Spore Frog, which also saves John's Fairy. I then pass, and on my end step, John casts the Sphinx's Revelation for 5, gaining 5, and drawing 5. John loses 1 and makes his Fairy token, and then draws for turn and casts an Orzhov Signet. He then plays the earlier tutored for Blackblade Reforged, and then a Cranial Plating, and he goes to combat. Despite his massive equipments, he just pokes me for 1 with a Fairy token, and passes. Arja draws and casts Braids Arisen Nightmare, and then casts Diabolic Intent and sacrifices her to tutor for a card. He finds and casts Pick Your Poison, naming enchantment. With Matt sacrificing Erebos, I sacrifice Grand Melee, and John sacrifices Bitter Blossom respectively. With the forced attacks then gone, Arja is able to skip through combat and passes. Matt draws and plays a Shipwreck Marsh, and then casts Skull Clamp. He follows it up by casting Smothering Abomination, and then moves the Skull Clamp onto Azlask. Matt then continues by casting a Blasting Station, and he goes to combat. He swings his commander at Arja, and Arja eats it with Meren. Matt then draws 2 cards from the Skull Clamp, and he passes after that. I draw and replay Mahault in my main phase. I get the on-cast trigger from the Silverback Elder, and I get a mountain off the top 5 and put it to the field. I then swing the Portraiser at John, but he sadly chumps it with a Fairy token, so I get no extra combat steps and have to pass. John's turn is quite quick though, as he draws, plays an island, and passes. Arja's main phase has Evolutionary Leap coming in, and he activates it paying 1 green to sacrifice Spore Frog, and he reveals until he hits a Carrion Feeder. And he then casts a Carrion Feeder. Moving to his end step, he brings back the Spore Frog with Meren, and passes to Matt. Matt's upkeep has him sacrificing the Catacomb Sifter to the Smothering Abomination, and he draws a card from it, and then draws a card in his draw step. He then plays a Battlefield Forge for turn, and casts a Glaring Fleshraker. He follows it up by casting a Writhing Chrysalis. This gets him a Fleshraker trigger, and he gets to make 3 spawn tokens. With the initial spawns coming in, Matt gets 3 untap triggers from the Blasting Station and uses them all on Arja, and then deals 3 to each of his opponents from the second part of the Glaring Fleshraker. We then move to the Chrysalis trigger, and John decides to use this as a chance to overload a Cyclonic Rift. Unfortunately for the table, Matt is ready though with a Mana Drain, and counters the spell. The 6 spawns then enter, dealing 6 to us, and the Rising Chrysalis then enters, dealing an extra 1. Matt then sacrifices a spawn to draw a card and make a mana. And he uses the mana to cast a Soul Ring, which, because of the Glaring Fleshraker, makes him another 3 spawn tokens and deals another 3 to us. He then sacrifices 3 more spawns to cast Eldrazi Confluence, and he picks the mode to make spawns 3 times, making him a total of 9 spawns, and because of the Glaring Fleshraker, we all take 9 damage, winning Matt the game. Game review time. This game was 49 minutes and 53 seconds, and honestly, I don't know what's happening. Azlask started as kind of a joke deck that took on a bit of a life of its own, because I got really into the idea of it, and now it's not, it doesn't lose. Have you ever done that? Have you ever built a deck where you're like, this is going to be so stupid and so bad, and I'm going to immediately take it apart, only to discover that it's the exact opposite and it's awesome, and all you want to do is play it and make it even better, and then potentially foil it out and waste a lot of money and just go crazy? Because that's what's happening right now. Outside of that, unfortunately, John's Chromium deck didn't do a whole heck of a lot, despite the fact that oftentimes he's been really, really powerful with that deck. It's kind of deceptive, and he runs a lot of controlling effects, but all we really saw was the Ghostly Prison, and then the Cyclonic Rift that didn't get to resolve. Arja playing Meren was kind of funny because I had given Matt the Azlask deck, which is an experience counter-based deck, and Arja was playing his own. And interestingly enough, the only experience counter carrying creature that I don't have in Azlask is Meren, because I can't find my copy of it. But it seemed like he played a lot of the typical stuff you see. Spore Frog and Enzrag would have been just not good. Not good. I think it just results in a complete stalemate where no one can do anything. I keep attacking forever and no damage ever happens. Although, as we found, I just had to attack someone who wasn't Arja. Outside of that, as soon as Solemnity came out, I think Arja's numbers were pretty bad as a result, because he was so far behind in experience counters, he just really couldn't catch up. Beyond that, I think the deck did what it wanted to do. There's a lot of sacrifice effects, as you saw, but outside, it just didn't have enough. My playing the general Mahault deck is getting really fun. I went into this thinking this would be a kind of cute idea, and Gruul are kind of two of the three colors that I like, with my favorite shard being Jund. And it just keeps getting better and better. I filmed a third game with it before I took it apart, and that game's even cooler than this one. And it's just fun. Grand Melee is a hilarious card. The fact that I get to force interaction in combat and my creatures continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger is really fun. Like, I don't know what else to say. This is a really fun archetype. And if you're looking for something to do in Gruul that isn't like Rurik Thar or something else like that, definitely check this out. It's relatively inexpensive and it's really, really fun. I don't know what else to say. But otherwise, yeah, this is a great game. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to playing these decks a little bit more. And before you know it, I guess we're going to be looking at Moonburrow decks. So yeah, just hope you're having fun. Hope you're having some good games. And again, this is a one-take shot, which probably explains some of the weirdness that I've said in this, but I'm getting more and more comfortable. So hopefully you enjoyed it. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, but it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.